1:31 p.m., and I will conduct the roll. Supervisor McGorty? Here. And Supervisor Hashak?
Here.
All right, moving on to item 2A, nomination and election of the chair of the Economic Development Standing Committee for the remainder of the 2023 calendar year. I'd like to nominate or open nominations at this time.
I nominate John.
Well,
As chair of the board, I would appreciate John taking on this responsibility. And either one of us could do it, but I like John's initiative. He put our agenda together. And I know that he's thought about this long and hard, as have I, but I would like it if you would consider being our chair.
well, thank you. You know, it's a coin flip for me. So I really appreciate working together. And we've been a good team in the ad hoc, and so now it's a different format. I guess we have to do something. So if you want me to be chair, I'll do it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I guess we don't need much more of a vote than that.
We might need a motion. Oh.
So I make a motion that John Haschak, Supervisor John Haschak, be the chair of our ad hoc.
I'll second that.
Is there any?
Who's asking for public comment?
You have to call for it. You're the chair now.
No, we haven't voted on it yet.
I don't think.
Okay, is there public comment? Okay, I'll call the question. Oh. Mr.
Peter,
McNamee.
you'll want to unmute yourself.
Well, actually, good morning. I just wanted to congratulate the standing committee for its initial meeting and say that the Grassroots Institute, who I'm speaking on behalf of, welcomes the attention the board is invoking on this incredible issue of economic development in the county. And I look forward to working with the standing committee as you move forward. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
None at this time.
Okay, we'll call the question.
Supervisor McCourty?
Yes.
Supervisor Hashak?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, so moving on to item 2B. Discussion and possible action, including adoption of the 2023 Economic Development Standing Committee meeting calendar. Right. So, let's see. I got to pull it up. You probably have it attached here, right?
Yeah, this is Atlas Pearson, Senior Deputy Clerk of the Board. We went with the quarterly model that was proposed whenever this standing committee was created. So it'd be meeting in June, September, and December at 1:30 p.m. on the September 25th and December 18th. And then at the beginning of next year, we'd go through with for a quarterly calendar.
Yeah, we got some input that December might not be the best month for this. So maybe we should do it January, April, July, October.
Through the chair, if I may, those 4 months are the months that Clerk of the Board has assessment appeals. So we already have a higher meeting volume during those months.
Okay.
Supervisor Haschak, I think we can work around that. I agree with you. December is not the ideal month, but I usually find that when I've scheduled things at that time of the year, if it's before the 20th, usually I get participation.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Okay. So,
All right.
given that the deputy clerk is concerned about making things
Yeah.
fit, I know that adding another standing committee, that's always a big issue, is staffing it and having the ability to meet here and broadcast and everything else. So I'm okay with it. I think we can probably make this work.
Okay, is there any public comment? Okay,
Seeing none.
seeing none. Any online?
No.
All right, so we'll call the question.
I need a motion.
Oh,
So motion for approving our calendar as presented.
okay, second.
Supervisor Hashak?
Yes.
Supervisor McGordy?
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously.
All right, moving on to item 2C, which is discussion and possible action, including presentation on economic development and workforce trends in Mendocino County. This is one I brought. Bruce Wilson is the executive director of the Workforce Alliance of the North Bay. So I've been working with him for quite a few years now, and he had an analysis done of the 4 counties that he represents in the Workforce Alliance, which is Napa, Lake, Mendocino, and Marin. And so this specific report that he has focuses just on Mendocino County. So I wanted him to present the findings, and I hope that he's online.
Yes, it looks like he initially denied the panelist request, but we're working on bringing him in now.
Hi, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Bruce.
Hi.
So-
Wasn't sure if I was able to be patched through. I do have a presentation for the board. Are we ready to kick it off? I can share my screen.
Yeah, and I just think that, we've talked a lot about workforce development, and I see that Michelle Hutchins is here in the audience, who's worked on workforce development a lot. And so there is a lot of interest in our community for that, and, education and knowing where we need to go is critically important for developing, the workforce that we need. So if you could share your screen or do whatever you need to do.
Wonderful.
And
Let
thank
me
you for being
see.
here.
Absolutely, and thank you everyone for having me. Let me know when you can see my screen.
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. All right. Well, I'm really excited to be joining you today. As Supervisor Hashak mentioned, my name is Bruce Wilson. I'm the Executive Director of the Workforce Alliance of the North Bay, and we are the Regional Workforce Development Board for the 4 counties that he just mentioned. And it's a pretty significant area that we cover, and what we're all about is trying to help employers find skilled workers that will sustain their businesses, sustain the local economy and regional economy. And we're also trying to help job seekers find quality jobs in their communities that are going to allow them to reach levels of self-sufficiency. So we always are trying to have our hand on the pulse of the local economy, and trying to make sure that workforce development and economic development are not separate circles, but are concentric circles working together. I would say that in the course of this presentation, I'll hopefully make a stronger case that not just economic development partners and workforce development partners, but government and education and several of our nonprofit partners need to be walking hand in hand if we're going to address ultimately the challenges of the local economy and workforce. So again, my name is Bruce Wilson. We recently worked with a very solid partner that we've worked with for several years in Lightcast. Lightcast does a ton of research throughout the country. Let's see if I can advance my screen here. There we go. There's a ton of research throughout the country. They have proprietary software in addition to looking at data from all of our traditional sources at the federal and state level. And they're able to draw conclusions that I have found pretty compelling through my years in workforce development. Some of their latest reports are talking about, what are we doing about this demographic drought? The notion that we have more jobs than we actually have people to work those jobs, and whether that is a temporary issue or whether it's a structural issue. So a lot of great recommendations that come out of their report. You can see some of the most recent reports that they've provided lately. I will say that in the report that you have in front of you, we took a look at really trying to understand what makes Mendocino County tick in terms of the economy and where the economy might be going, and really having a clear understanding of the jobs that are available, the types of skills that employers are actually looking for, et cetera. And then looking at the job seeker side and whether the community is going to be able to meet those needs, if you will. I think there are some challenges, and again, we're in this report making a case that we might need to have a concentrated talent alignment strategy that is not focused on one magic pill, if you will, that's going to solve all of the challenges that we have economically and from a workforce standpoint, but is multifaceted. Looking at matching current workers with job openings that are available right now. How are we going to attract new talent coming into the community, addressing barriers to labor force participation, et cetera. And I did just send this presentation to the clerk of the board, and you will be able to make it available for yourselves as well. So first, let's take a quick look. John, can I just check in real quick? What is the timing of my presentation? I don't want to run over the
Yeah,
time that you
maybe
have.
10 more minutes.
Okay, great. I'm going to zoom through this, you guys, and again, we'll have more detail in the presentation. So first, let's take a look at who Mendocino County is. And when we do that, we're looking at these are the kinds of questions I'm trying to answer for myself. What kind of industries have the highest concentrations of employment? What are the growing jobs? What is our current workforce composition? Who are the top employers? What skills are in the highest demand? We want to have answers to all of these questions in order to make sure that we are using our local resources most effectively. From a demographic standpoint, we're trying to have answers. Who lives and works in our region? How diverse it is? What's the median income and the cost of living? So how hard might it be for a family to progress and reach self-sufficiency in the community? Working age population, what's really looking at who's coming into the workforce in the next 5 years and beyond. So all of these things are really important to look at. And then finally, I'm trying to understand what's our current talent supply structure and framework, what skills and equity gaps exist in our community, et cetera. So these are things that are important from a workforce development standpoint and to understand as we try to design a strategy that's going to meet the needs of our local economy. I will say that we believe, and this report underscores it several times, that in order to address economic and workforce challenges, we have to work together, and we have to make sure that our government agencies our jurisdictions, as well as the Workforce Development Board, as well as our community nonprofits are all working together to move the needle in terms of addressing talent alignment. Follow the lead of employers, meaning we have to bring employers by industry into the room and get them to speak with one voice about what their specific challenges are. That way we can have our community support partners, which I just mentioned, develop the blueprint that's going to help them move forward. And finally, I would say we need to focus on skills. So from a workforce standpoint, I'm not looking at the number of degrees we have in a community. That's typically what we tend to look at, but we're looking at what skills are employers actually recruiting for. And that way we can come up with short-term training programs to meet those skill needs and have a clean match, if you will. So again, a quick economic overview. This slide right here just helps me understand what are the top 10 industries in the community and what the location quotient might be. The location quotient on the far right, the higher that is, the better it is. It's an indicator of the concentration of the industry to the community, or the importance of the industry to the community is another way of looking at it. We're also always trying to look at the average earnings. So you can see that beverage manufacturing, likely your wine industry, is a very important industry to Mendocino County. It does show that there's a 3%. It's while some of these other industries like accommodation is growing at 17%, beverage manufacturing looks like it's going to shrink in the next several years. I'm also looking at what our top county occupations are and what they pay. And also, I think it's important when we look at these occupations, which occupations are growing and which occupations might be shrinking. Not a lot of occupations that are shrinking, none actually. Typically, I look at that because, you know, that's where we can seek to work with those industries and develop transferable skills training programs to make sure that folks can stay in the community that they live in. This is just a real quick snapshot of the companies that are posting the most job openings in your community. So County of Mendocino has been doing a lot of hiring, if you will. They have 240 over 2022 job postings that were available, followed by Ukiah Unified School District, Adventist Health, etc. And then on the right-hand side, those are profiles where we can look at where job seekers are currently working, if you will. So that just gives us a sense for the churn, if you will, within the community and where there might be opportunities. Top skills and demand of those job postings, nursing type of skills are most in demand. And you can see they're the top 3, if you will, in the healthcare industry, followed by merchandising, discharge planning, etc. This really helped us work with our community colleges and any training providers to make sure that we and they know that these are the most in-need skills, and they might be areas where we may need to develop or expand training programs if we're not able to meet the need.
Bruce,
Again, yes.
Quick question. So go back to that previous slide.
Okay.
So the y-axis, is that number of applications?
Number of applications. Mendocino top skills and demand. Are you talking about the numbers at the bottom? Yes. 200, 400? So these, okay, so this is looking at profiles from an employer. So when an employer is posting a job, they're also posting where the knowledge, skills, and abilities somebody might need in order to be successful on the job. So this is from an employer job posting of skills they actually need.
So these are individual skills then, is what you're talking about in this number?
Yes, individual skills in terms of where they fall.
Thank you.
And I'm gonna look at that more closely, but so if you're looking, for instance, at nursing, I'm looking at that 800 number. It goes past 1400. That is just the number of postings that were requiring these types of skill sets. So again, when you look at a job description, for instance, knowledge, skills, and abilities, that's where some of this would be pulled from.
And Bruce, if you could go
Yes.
to the previous slide, that it shows County of Mendocino with 118 employee profiles. So does that mean job types, or what does that actually mean? Because I guess if you look at the next slide, you know, it doesn't show that many jobs in government service. You know.
Right, and yet government is one of the biggest industry, which I'll show. This just says that 118 job seekers. So when you're putting your resume in Indeed.com or whatnot, these are folks that might have had some experience working at the County of Mendocino, current or past workers.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that because, you know, government service is a big employer in Mendocino County.
Right, right. But people move, they move as they go up their career ladders. Sometimes they go within a certain organization, or they might jump between organizations as they're looking for that next career pathway job, which I touch on in a little bit. So let me get to that piece. And then again, these are the skills, top skills that are most in demand by industries or employers in Mendocino County. And because healthcare is one of the most important industries in Mendocino County from a current size standpoint and a growth standpoint, it makes sense that these healthcare related skills are going to be going in those job availability postings. So when they're looking for job seekers, they're looking for people with these skill sets. We just don't know whether your current workforce has the skill sets, these skill sets that are in demand from your local industry. And that's where the structural piece would come in. That's where we need to look at whether we are working as a community to develop training programs that are going to land these skill sets. So I'm just going to go over this really quick. We had talked a little bit about whether digital skills are changing. Now, Mendocino, you can see that there have been a lot more job postings with needs for higher level digital skills. It doesn't mean that the Silicon Valley jobs are going to necessarily be in all these rural communities, but I think that there's going to be organic opportunity in those what we call these legacy occupations. So it's not going to change the kinds of industries that are important in Mendocino County, but those industries are becoming more digital. And it's just that we're saying that we need to make sure that our training programs are offering those digital skill sets that these occupations are requiring. So let's take a quick look at Mendocino's. We looked at the economy now, just a snapshot. Let's take a quick look at our ability from a people standpoint to supply workers to that economy. And this is looking at our population trends for Mendocino County and our job trends. And what's really promising about this slide is that as jobs go up, Mendocino County's population is going up. And I'll show later that the younger population is growing as well. And that bodes really well for Mendocino County looking, as Supervisor Haschak mentioned, we cover 4 counties, and this slide right here is going in the opposite direction, where we see population going straight down and jobs going straight up, which indicates that we just don't have enough bodies. But here, it's just a matter of whether we're going to take advantage of the fact that population is going up as jobs go up. So you can see here on the left-hand side, the light-colored, salmon-colored is our 2028 population projections, and our 2023 population is the darker colored bar. And in pretty much every age cohort, you can see population growth, with a few exceptions, like 5 to 9 years of age going down. But you see 10 to 14, 15 to 19, 20 to 24, and so on, 25 to 29, your population's going to go up. And then in those prime earnings years, your population's going up, 35 to 39 years. So that all bodes really well for Mendocino County. Supervisor Haschak and I just looked at this for another county, and it's the total opposite, which indicates some significant challenges. So again, a really great thing for Mendo there. One of the challenges that Mendocino County, like most communities, are going to need to continue to work on is getting that labor force participation rate back up. So on the far left, 2018, 2019, that's your labor force participation rate at above 56%. And those are the number of people either working or looking for work. And then we can get the participation rate by essentially looking at your population 16 and older. That's what gives us the amount of people that have chosen not to even participate in looking for work. So again, Mendocino County, it's about getting people back into the workforce, and that's going to help our local businesses. And there are many different strategies to do that, which our report touches on. This is just looking at the kinds of jobs that the community might offer. The majority of jobs in Mendocino County, 66%, don't require formal education or a high school diploma. A lot of those occupations are going to be great launching pads for our younger populations, for instance, in the accommodation and food sector, and then we would keep working with them as we go up. I tend to look at this from all of our community standpoint, because if we have an oversupply of degree holders, if you will, in a community, and we don't have jobs that require those degrees, then a community could risk losing people from their community that have these higher education and bachelor's degrees and higher, if the jobs don't require their investment of time. So that's where you might see migration patterns. And some of our other communities are seeing substantive migration patterns, and Mendocino County is not. A lot of things are looking pretty good for Mendo from a workforce standpoint. This is, again, very important from my standpoint. Licensed practical vocational nurses, that might be a launching position, so we can help people get into the healthcare career field. There's clearly a ton of opportunity in Mendocino County for healthcare, but if we keep working with somebody at that, so that's an entry-level job, look at the salary difference as they take the next higher level job in their career ladder. So that's how these things work. You get them into a career field, and you keep working with these folks in your community and encouraging them to get higher level skill sets, and then they're going to be able to really reach those opportunities for self-sufficiency in their communities. So just quickly, I mean, a $53,000 difference for a registered nurse and acupuncturist is $20,000, et cetera. So now that we have an idea of where what the economy looks like and what the challenges that we need to address, we have put together a 6-phase strategy that is multi-years long. And those 6 phases start with things at the low-hanging fruit, like talent attraction types of strategies. Then we have transferable skill strategies that might go from up to 2 years of work, technical and certificate degree programs, making sure those degree programs are matching the skill needs that employers are actually looking for, et cetera. So as I mentioned, I want to underscore this, it's not just one organization that can do it. We need to make sure that we're getting the same information out to everybody. Everybody has a shared understanding of the challenges, and that we all see value in working to develop our local talent resources to feed that economy. And you can see some of the partners that would be required to be working together. It's a community collaborative effort. Just real quick, I'm going to, for sake of time, I sent this out. That 6-phase talent strategy that I mentioned, here are different actual strategies that we can deploy that the Workforce Development Board. We are actually looking at all of these strategies, and we've gotten help from the Irvine Foundation and the California Workforce Association to see some of these through. But I wanted to just highlight a simple thing like a healthcare industry can do just by looking at data. We might look at migration patterns and see where people are moving and what the earnings gain potential might be for an RN in different communities. You can see somebody doing an RN job in Los Angeles would stand to make an $11 per hour increase in wages if they move to the North Bay, just by example. Transferable skills is phase 2, and we're looking at upskilling and reskilling workers. And this is where we might work with our community partners to provide digital upskilling. What we're finding in our research is that just one digital skill can help somebody earn 23% more in a job requiring more than a job that requires no digital skill. So this might be something as simple as using point of sale software and making sure that our folks are getting access to that training. Technical and degree programs, you can see making sure that our colleges and our training providers are actually training to the needs we need. We can train the best bullfighter in the world, but they're not going to find a job in Mendocino County. So we want to make sure that all of our training programs are aligned to what is making Mendocino County tick, and that's what that section is there for. You can go into more detail in the report, and we're going to be adding more strategies as we move forward into the years. But you can see, at the 4 to 7 year time frame, we all still need to be working together to make sure that the talent delivery system for Mendo is feeding that local economy, and that local economy is growing on all facets. So I'm just going to pause there and stop and see if there might be any questions from the group.
Sure. So this is a very interesting report, and I'm looking at our resources and thinking about our community, and we are positioned well, obviously, in the medical world, being kind of a center on the edge of civilization, as it were, in Northern California, where people come for healthcare. And it seems like that's something that's worth pursuing. I'm a real believer that you should start with economic development with what you have, rather than creating kind of a cargo cult approach of wishing that something will show up. It's already here. And in support of that, to bring up your point about improving digital skills and also perhaps medical personnel, we have our local high schools and Mendocino College, which has a nursing program, and I've kind of lost track, but the last I knew, the Ukiah Adult School also had a nursing program, unless they've been combined. So, Darcy, do you know where that stands? Is that something that you're familiar with?
No, I-
I'm sorry,
That
was that a
me.
question
Sorry
for
about
me?
that.
Yeah.
Could you repeat it?
Yeah, I
Sorry.
was just wondering if you know if Ukiah High still has a nursing program in their adult school, or did they combine that with Mendocino College's nursing program?
It's been in the adult school for a number of years. If it's combined, I don't know that it's combined. There is a
Okay.
bridge program at the college, but I'm sure folks in the can speak to that. But the licensed vocational program was in the adult school, and then MCOE was doing medical assisting and some other classes out there as well.
So it seems like we have some capacity locally to assist in it, and if Adventists follow through with their idea of creating a medical center with 150 beds, this could be Ukiah's future. Besides having educated people, there's other things that we need too, like a place for them to live, which the board is trying to take steps to move. But I just find this interesting as we think about economic development in our community. We have something that clearly is potentially a winner for us if we can adopt the culture. And in both cases, I think that the high school and Mendocino College can play a real role in that. Do you have any
Right.
insight on how you make things like this happen?
Is this a question for me?
Yes,
Sorry.
it is.
Yeah, I was zooming through and I didn't catch that final strategy piece. But one of the things we recommend in the report is convening employers by industry and really getting them to speak with one voice and letting them be the leader in terms of sharing what their biggest challenges might be. And I believe wholeheartedly with everything that you said. So we have this existing industry. It pays really well. It has a ton of career pathway opportunities for your local workers. And, you know, it's a strength of Mendocino County. So the question becomes, how do you in your role, make sure that industry continues to remain strong, continues to grow, and continues to offer those career pathway and self-sufficiency level jobs to your community. So the way I would approach it or suggest approaching it is convening, making sure that we have a direct line of communication with the industry as a whole, not just one organization, but the industry, getting them to a table, if you will, and facilitating conversations with them around what their specific needs are. It doesn't have to just be workforce needs. So there could be some simple strategies that are holding growth back that has nothing to do with workforce. I will say though that in my experience, most of the issues surround workforce bodies and specific skill sets. When we're having that conversation with employers, only employers are at the center table, if you will, and we get community support partners like the ones I mentioned in my slide, economic development organizations, government, workforce boards, chambers of commerce, nonprofits, kind of sitting around the edge of the room and just in listening mode. All we want to know is what does the industry need? And then that gives us a pathway, if you will, a North Star to start leveraging our local community resources that would have a laser focus on the issues that we might have heard from the industry. So in terms of, just a quick answer, that's how I might approach it.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think it boils down to what you said a little bit ago about collaboration and listing that group of entities that need to be at the table or in the room at least, and figuring it out. And so that's what I think that this standing committee can help facilitate, getting people together to talk about what the issues are, what the needs are, and how do we move that forward. Right. So,
Absolutely.
You know, and looking at the job requirements and educational achievement for people in the county, it's certainly an interesting chart, and that's on, well, it's about halfway up. But it's really, you know, it shows that there's a lot of jobs that require no education or a high school diploma, and we don't have the laborers for, it sounds like. And also with a bachelor's degree, but then a graduate degree, we're lagging behind. And,
Right.
or, no, a graduate degree, we have the population with that educational level, but we don't have all the jobs. And that's how I'm reading that. Are you?
That's exactly right. Most of the jobs in Mendocino County don't require, and we can think of these as those entry-level jobs and then the middle skill jobs, but don't require formal education in order to get into the jobs. That's why I think those are really great opportunities to get our young people with work skill sets, work experience skill sets in many cases, and we can work with our industries for that. And then bachelor's degree, what I'm seeing is that you're right, there are a number of jobs in Mendocino County. Over 20% of the jobs in Mendocino County do require a bachelor's degree in order to meet minimum qualifications. And we have about 15% of Mendocino County's population, at least according to the data, that have that bachelor's degree. So it's an opportunity to keep working with four-year degree programs to make sure that we have degree programs that are specifically aligned to those jobs in Mendo that require that bachelor's degree. So you don't want to just have any bachelor's degree program, but make sure you have those bachelor's degree programs with jobs that exist in Mendo. So it's all about alignment.
Well, since Mendo doesn't have bachelor degree programs, that would mean working with Humboldt or Sonoma State.
Exactly.
And making sure that they're doing what needs to be done. And it also means that we have to attract people, college graduates, bring them home, or attract people from elsewhere. And I think that's where the housing comes in as one of the crucial elements.
That's right. And that's I think that is really the secret sauce, is understanding that this is a community-wide effort, and there's where are all the resources and the organizations that can contribute to this particular goal, and making sure that we have a strategic approach to doing it. But Humboldt County or Humboldt College, Sonoma State, we need to make sure that we have direct lines of communication with those programs, and I think that's where the value of regionalism could play a role.
Right. Anything else?
No, that's all I have.
Bruce, if you could stay on, and we'll go to public comment. And
Okay.
if people have any comments that might apply to you, appreciate that. Okay.
Hi, Bruce. Anna Newman from the Noyo Harbor District. I just wanted to offer myself as a resource because I understand as a fishing industry, we're never going to make those charts and graphs, although we do employ over 300 jobs within the Noyo Harbor fishing industry fleet alone. So I have 240 vessel-based jobs and another 60 to 100 jobs in the processing industry, but you're never going to see a job application on Indeed.com or any of those lines for work on commercial fishing boats. It's just not how we hire. It's not how our industry and our fleet works, although we are a significant hub in that workforce development. So if you need any help on that facet, I've got a lot of data from my guys and gals and from the fleet, and I would love to be a participant in this conversation because I know you're never going to find commercial fishing pop up on Indeed.com. And if you do, be very wary of that job.
So, I have a question for you, Anna. Anna, if I could have a question for you. So this is an example of a very specialized industry inside of Mendocino County that, probably has value to the community. I know it does, and it also makes up kind of the unique face of Mendocino County. So where do people come from who take those jobs?
A lot of them are second, third generation fishermen who come in and who've been part of the community for a long time. So they'll work on their dad's boats or something along those lines, their family vessels. Or as crew, we alternate between fisheries and between ports for different fisheries. And there's like networks that we all work in. We know who the captains are, and we'll search around for different crew positions that way. A lot of times, once you get a good captain and you really like that captain, you work well together, the vessel will be passed from captain to that, you call them like deck bosses, so the deck boss will take it, and the captain will often carry the note for the deck boss to buy out the boat, because a lot of banks aren't even gonna loan in those types of situations. So it's very private, not in a secretive way, but it's just something we've been used to working in our own circles for so long that it's why you're not gonna ever find, the fishing industry popping up on these larger websites and these larger databases. We just work within ourselves, and there's a lot of trust that comes within that. Who the good captains are, who the good boats are to buy, all of that stuff.
Thank you.
Not going to find it on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, maybe Michael Katz has something to say.
Speaking of LinkedIn or speaking of fishing, lots of respect to the people who are riding those boats to get the fish. I went out for the first time and it was not a pretty sight. And I'm amazed that humanity has lasted as long as we have. But hey, hello everyone, Michael Katz, Executive Director of the Mendocino Cannabis Alliance. I do have a quick question for Bruce, just one word question. Well, and when you talk about crop production and farm stuff in this proposal, the document that was posted, is that about cannabis or is that about everything but cannabis? And was cannabis considered in any meaningful way in the development of this document?
Yeah. Hi, Michael. Yeah, cannabis has been a tough one because we're a federal program, and we get most of our funding from the feds. We actually, from a workforce board standpoint, are looking for ways to support the cannabis industry by finding non-federal funds, if you will, because it is just a growing opportunity. It wasn't looked at specifically in this report, and I honestly don't have a lot of faith that we have good, solid data on the industry at the federal level to state that with any confidence that there's anything there.
Yeah, thanks for that. So this is a huge blind spot and a gap in trying to relate directly to Mendocino County, because here in Mendocino County, it was estimated before legalization that there were up to like 10,000 cultivators living in this county, and many thousands of those people are not part of the regulated market, and thousands of people who tried to become part of the regulated market have been unsuccessful. People are still to this day dropping out, and there's if there were 10,000 sites in Mendocino, that means that there are thousands of Mendocino residents who their primary income for a really long time was small batch cannabis cultivation. And so to not consider that specifically in relationship to workforce development in Mendocino for the people who have lost their farms or who haven't transitioned into the regulated market, it seems like there's a gigantic part of the community and potential workforce here that's been completely left out of this conversation. It has nothing to do with federal funding. It just has to do with the humans who live in Mendocino and how they would potentially be looking for work, have X amount of skills, et cetera. I know that Mendocino Cannabis Alliance was working with Move 2030 and Mendocino College to develop like an internship program at some point, apprenticeship program. And so, talking about what is already here, award-winning world-class cannabis is in Mendocino. Our local farmers just took home 16 state fair awards in cannabis. And so identifying how to take the workforce And a lot of those farms used to hire people too, to do trimming and to do farm work, but because the economy has been so bad and the regulations have been so poor, a lot of those opportunities have been lost. So figuring out how to stabilize this community will not only lead to more inputs to the county, because we've seen many, many businesses locally here suffer because of the challenges in cannabis, and that's not really addressed here either. But by bringing those folks on and creating a more supportive environment and understanding that, I think that's going to be key to shifting workforce here in Mendocino related to the cannabis industry. So thank you for your consideration.
Right. And I just want to make sure I get your name, because I think for you and the previous speaker, a lot of when we look at reports, we're looking at data, but that data needs to be ground truthed, if you will. And it's working with partners such as yourselves to make sure that we're able to fully understand these other opportunities, whether it be fishing or cannabis opportunities, and what the career pathways might be associated with that. I mean, just off the top, I would respond that your industry, the cannabis industry, is an industry that is set up well from a transferable skill standpoint for other shrinking industries or crop production that might be going in the opposite direction. But that's something where our workforce boards ought to be able to work on.
Sure, it's Michael Katz is my name for the Mendocino
Thank you.
Cannabis Alliance. Thanks.
Hello, Michelle Hutchins, former County Superintendent of Schools. And I just want to highlight a couple of data points that I question, I guess. One of them is the hiring for Mendocino County Office of Education. There was a transfer of special education teachers from three local district programs to the county. And so that did create a 1-year spike in hiring for Mendocino County Office of Education. So that data that you see is not annually normed. So potentially looking at a span of 3-year data instead of just looking at 1-year comparisons might be a better trajectory when looking at the job posting data from the different industries. The other questions I guess I have is, if we are backwards mapping the industry needs into K-16 education, who is leading that effort? And if you are bringing together a table of industry people, which I agree with is an essential process, and I like the way you have your horseshoe effect, who leads that effort, who collects the data, and then who is responsible for reporting out what the results are? Because K-12 education is going to have some large challenges. Most of the career technical education that's outside of the one city that we have of Ukiah Unified is ag and is agriculture in focus, and often driven by the teacher that's hired, not necessarily by the industry needs. So it's important that we start early with K-12 education, because there's going to be a lot of effort needed to really bring along that partner. As when they bring industry in, they're often, sitting an industry person down in a classroom and not even engaging or asking the industry person really the right questions, because they don't know what to ask. And so we really need some skilled assistance that's focused and that can report in those accountability processes.
Well, let me, I'll take a quick shot, Michelle.
Yeah.
One thing so this report was intended just to get a snapshot of what the economy looks like, where we stand in feeding that economy, if you will, the skill set that needs to grow, and then to leave off with an optimistic viewpoint, saying here are strategies that the community could deploy to make sure that our local economy has a strong workforce far into the future. So there isn't a specific approach that any one organization is leading. I'm making the case that, if we work together, we could all collectively lead to develop that future workforce. Like in the Workforce Alliance of the North Bay, we have some resources, but those resources are tied to specific strategies. But we can't deal with everything. We can deal with transferable skills, and we can deal with job match. But first 5 programs in a community ought to be at the workforce table, because third grade reading scores have a direct correlation in worker success, but nobody's measuring it or supporting that from a workforce standpoint. So first 5 should lead for any strategy for those preschool level people, because we know it's going to have a great impact on future workers. And the K through 12 system needs to be the leader in those career tech education programs. The workforce board can be the leader in those transferable skills and on-the-job training programs that might help, for instance, the fishing industry. So I think what we need is to all come to the table and say, we need a Mendocino County Align for Talent initiative where we all collectively lead, where we let those who do it best do it.
I guess I would just reply that there needs to be someone leading that effort. Like, while I agree that everyone leads their individual industry and area, there needs, in order for that to be successful, you need someone or some agency that is responsible for collecting data and working as a note keeper even and organizing the discussion so that there's continued value in that process and not just standalone conversations. Our county has engaged in standalone conversations for many years, and I agree with the collaborative direction that you're proposing. But what I guess I'm saying to our Board of Supervisors is, please remember that there needs to be a lead agency that is going to lead this effort, because all of these individual factors or parts that need to come together need some kind of form to come into. Otherwise, it will remain scattered.
Yeah, and I think that that's our next item.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
And I think what Michelle pointed out too was that, I worked with Michelle and Senator McGuire and bringing people together about looking at what are the challenges for K-12 education and doing, some of the career and technical education components. And we certainly have a lot of challenges in the rural communities that we serve, because it's not easy to get a industry representative to teach one class or half a day, or all of those challenges that we kind of looked at. And then the pandemic happened and we got redirected, but there's not a easy solution in a lot of these places. So thank you for bringing that up. Any other public comment? Online?
Seeing none.
All right. Well, let's see. Do we need a motion to accept the presentation, or can we?
I would make a motion to accept the presentation.
Okay, I'll second that. And we'll call the question.
Supervisor McCourty?
Yes.
Supervisor Hashak?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you,
And-
Bruce.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce Wilson, for the presentation, and that information from the Workforce Alliance of the North Bay, and the work that you do. And hopefully we will we'll come up with a strategy to incorporate some of your findings.
Absolutely, and I'm happy to work with you and this committee as we move forward. We have some very clear opportunities and steps we could take, and I'm thrilled that you guys are asking these questions and having me to present this information. So thank you again.
Okay,
Bye.
bye. Okay, agenda item number 2D, discussion and possible action regarding the vision for economic development in Mendocino County, roles of existing county departments and employees, and analysis of existing capacity and needs. So I put this on just as kind of looking at the scope of what we're doing, because this is our first meeting as the Economic Development Standing Committee, and we needed to have something that we could kind of have an open discussion about what our vision is for what we're trying to do here, how we're going to structure it, what we already have in our county, within the county workforce, and also, you know, entities outside. And so, you know, I think that we need to figure out the path forward, and certainly County Council, you know, reminded us during the full Board of Supervisor meeting that we have Brown Act, you know, issues to look at, and that's certainly been a change between Supervisor McGordy and myself. About when we were the ad hoc, we could talk every day about these issues and figure out where we were going and how to work with you know, West Company, which was had the contract within the last year, and so it was very productive, I thought. Now we have a different format, so we need to figure out some of those issues.
We do indeed, and you know, the first question always is, does county have a role in economic development? And I think, if anything, over the last 2.5 years as a supervisor, I've heard that over and over again, that our county feels strongly that someone should lead an effort, an organized effort. I was really happy just to have an ad hoc, but our county council thought there were some issues about going on and on and on and on one subject area, and so we're trying to come up with somewhat of a compromise to figure out what is permissible, and we think economic development is an ongoing topic, which is why we have a standing committee. We believe that at some point we'll probably have staff. We're sort of beginning to formulate a contract and grants program. Right now we're at a pretty important place in terms of grants for economic development from the Biden administration, and there's two kind of important avenues that we need representation for, which would be the SURF program, the Community Economic Resilience Fund. Did I get that right, Marianne? And then the other would be the Sonoma Mendocino Economic Development District, which will both channel funds, one from the feds and one from the state. So SMED is going to be more or less the economic development agency from the feds. So it's important that we have representation, and we don't really have internal capacity right now to do that. We don't have any economic development people. We hope in the future to have maybe someone at least an analyst level working in the executive office closely with CEO Antle and closely with the contract and grant team. In the interim, we have to come up with a little bit of a hybrid model, which is what we've sort of been doing. We've kind of cobbled together our ad hoc, which is now maturing into a standing committee. But I think it's also important that we continue to have representation on those boards. So our present contractors, Marianne Petrillo from West and Josh Metz from Regional Government Services, have done a really outstanding job. They've been very productive in this last year, doing almost $10 million of economic activity and different grants that they've received or given technical assistance to the city of Fort Bragg to receive. And I'll also go back a step further and just talk a little bit about infrastructure real quickly too, because we discovered during the drought emergency, when you and I served on the drought ad hoc, that we were able to really get the attention of state agencies, and we brought in, again, a sizable amount of money by by getting Department of Water Resources, drinking water department to work with the city of Fort Bragg and work with the city of Ukiah. So there's a real role for Mendocino County to play and kind of focusing attention on our economic needs here for infrastructure and for other kinds of economic development. You and I have discussed some priorities, and I'll see if I can remember them all, that we think that there's a future to develop on top of the economic activities we're already doing. One of them is the blue economy of Fort Bragg, which we'll probably get some public comment on. One of them is biofuels and the hydrogen highway of how do we create resilient forests and take the byproduct of that and turn it into a value-added product. And hydrogen is one of the things that we're looking at through the process of pyrolysis. We could also make syngas, which is combustible and would work in internal combustion motors for generating power as we look at creating microgrids. We've also, help me, John, because I'm forgetting, so there's
Well, we've been looking at industries too, like niche manufacturing, and
Right.
also, we have environmental health issues like forest resiliency. There's a lot of opportunities out there for economic growth.
And I also, we put broadband in there as something that's very, very important to the well-being of our economy, which is kind of elusive in some respects because but we know that there's funding, and there's going to be sizable public investment. So these are all things that we feel that need attention, that the county needs to be a player in. The county is a player in. In the case of broadband, we not only have our own internal committee, but we're also part of the Golden State Connect that rural county representatives of California are running. So these all require some expertise and input, and we don't have it internally, so we have to have a collaborative way of reaching out to the community. And I think that's what we sort of see this standing committee doing is interacting with the community. We're kind of hoping the community can organize some of the discussion. We know that West has capacity to do that. We've seen it. You and I have attended meetings. It seems to work well. And if coming from that, then we can begin to generate grants that address the issues that the community feels is a reasonable place to grow. Then I think that's what we want to do. I don't know if you have other things you'd like to add to that.
Well, I think your comments were right on. When we worked together on the drought issues, we had a consultant working with us and convening, all the water agencies from the county to figure out what the issues were and seeing where grants were available. And so that seemed to work very well. And economic development is a much bigger sphere than that. And we do need that kind of expertise, like you said. At the same time, we're trying to develop it internally, but we're not there yet. And so we need to continue our representation at these tables like SMED and the SURF and those entities. And to keep an eye out for what's out there, because otherwise it might just kind of bypass us.
If I just might add, there's two other big initiatives too, and one of them is water infrastructure, which we're involved with. We actually have a separate grant that is being run through the Mendocino County Water Agency, which is very small, not a big program, but we do have a good consultant working with us on that, Amir Aziz, and then the other area that we need to work on is housing. And housing, of course, is a very complex, difficult thing to sort of come from one point of view. So the Board of Supervisors, I believe, is making a real commitment to try to take us out of a different era where maybe we didn't encourage growth at all, but now we're kind of changing. So included in that is the Community Development Block Grant, which is presently being administered by the PBS and our Planning Building Services. And there's discussions of having that moved to the CEO's office and having it run again eventually by Darcy's team, along with an economic development analyst, if we go down that path. We'll have public comment in just a second. First, let's John and I finish our discussions.
Well, I think another part was, one thing we heard in those, when we had industry leaders meeting for lunches on the coast and inland, that they wanted a point person that they could come to in the county that would kind of look at their economic interest and kind of help them figure out paths forward. We just got a communication from MCA, Michael Katz, about, wanting to try to bring something like the Emerald Cup to Mendocino County, and who would be the point person in dealing with those kind of issues and helping navigate the bureaucracy for bringing economic development. So I think those are issues that we're dealing with. I guess I would like to go to county council before we go to public comment about, one of the ideas we had was to, if we're having these meetings quarterly, and then in between these meetings, we need to have these kind of working groups or something of that nature, technical advisory committee, working group, whatever you want to call it. And how can we do that without violating any Brown Act issues?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what the Brown Act says is essentially if you take a formal action of this committee to create another advisory body, then that advisory body is also a Brown Act entity. So if you were to appoint members, make some sort of formal action, then you would have to be dealing with the Brown Act, and then you'd have to be going through meetings like this one, which I think do present a bit of a resource strain. Your other option is if you were to ask the executive office or another appropriate department, you could ask them to essentially find mechanisms to have the stakeholder input, whether that's a technical advisory committee or whatever other tool might be appropriate. And then, not to get off topic, but there was one other thing I just wanted to make sure got encompassed in part of this discussion, which was I believe the board still needs to make a determination as to what it's going to do in terms of potential for committee overlap, specifically between the Economic Development Committee and then I think it's the boards of West and EDFC that are currently board appointments as well. I believe at the last discussion it was referred to this committee to come back with a recommendation as to how to tackle that, and I understood that to be part of this discussion.
Yeah. Okay. So if we had issues like housing, workforce development, bureaucratic issues that are kind of, could be potentially hindering economic development, then could we say, hey, executive office, we'd like you to kind of explore those ideas, bring them back to us as a standing committee. In the meantime, if it's housing, we want you to go, have a talk with the Community Development Corporation, or if it's workforce, maybe bring in some of those entities that Bruce Wilson just listed, and industry, and see what the issues are.
So I would, I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
I would say that you certainly can set up a structure like that. The only thing is that to the extent that you are looking to essentially be using staff resources more broadly, you may need to just have an appropriate action by the full board authorizing that to occur. So you probably don't need to do a referral to the board for every single question or request that's posed to the executive office on that front, but you may want to have it clear that sort of what the resource allocation is and what the expectation is going to be there through some sort of recommendation to the full board.
And that's why, looking back at the olden days of Pamela Swan and Tony Shaw, that they were our executive office contact who could do a lot of these functions. That's why I feel strongly having at least one economic development person would be very helpful in trying to move this along if Mendocino County wants to have a formal role in economic development for the community. Otherwise, I'm just seeing Darcy being kind, but thinking, oh my God, here comes another whole bunch of work that we don't really have capacity for, so I want to be mindful of that. I also think that some of these conversations are going on with the board as well. So we are discussing things like how do we improve our housing stock, and that was, the last meeting, we took some steps to try to improve the situation by limiting inclusionary housing on some of the developments and such. So it's very much on the minds of the board that for us to have economic development, people need to have a place to live, and it's really a critical problem. It's something that we hear over and over again. I don't know that this standing committee can do a lot for that, but the one thing that I think the standing committee can do, and what I hope we have a very robust interaction with the community, that this becomes a place where people have ideas about community economic development can interface with our board. That's what I'm hoping for, and the way to do it, I hope, is to have a robust opportunity for hearing. If we didn't have a formal technical advisory committee, if there was a organization within the community that was meeting regularly and again checking with county council, that we could attend the meetings to listen or participate, that would, but we didn't technically run the meetings, it seems to me as that still would be extremely useful.
So if it would help, so there are a number of exceptions that may be relevant there, but there are certain criteria that you have to meet. If it would help, I'm happy to prepare a memo for the committee and the board. In fact, I think we may already have one in the works, just addressing the scope of the various exceptions there. Generally, the rule is that it has to be an open and public meeting, available to anyone, and then you aren't able to discuss among yourselves the subject matter within the jurisdiction of the committee, which in this case would be really anything economic development related. So you could attend and watch those sorts of things if they're public, but we can provide a guidance document to you to be able to refer back to.
So if we were to attend those meetings, could we take part in the discussions?
No. If both of you are there and the discussion is related to economic development, what you'd have to do, if you wanted to do that, there is a mechanism to do it as essentially a joint meeting, which is where you notice the meeting of, whatever that body is also a meeting of the standing committee. So for example, from time to time, you might have a joint meeting of a board of supervisors and a city council, right, on a matter that's relevant to both. And they both meet in the same place. They sort of co-chair the meeting, and then they're able to discuss the matters with both full bodies there. This one, you would be able to just have it noticed as a meeting of the standing committee in addition to meeting of whatever the other entity is. And then, of course, all the usual Brown Act requirements apply. You got to publish, sufficiently in advance. You have to have it noticed, posted, et cetera.
John, you have any further thoughts on this?
Well, we have it budgeted for $150,000 for economic development, for whatever work we do. $35,000 needs to go to SMED for our participation there, whether it's in kind or just a direct payment. And so we have basically $115,000. And the way I see it is, how are we going to make the transition from where we are right now to a staff person doing this kind of work? Because we still need to keep our representation at the SMED board, we need to keep our representation at the SURF, and anything else that comes up in the meantime. And also, if we're going to convene these industry or have these discussions, who's going to do that between now and the hiring of this person? So
This might be a good time to open it up for discussion.
Well,
One
and
more
just
thing.
one other thing is that county council brought up the issue of, representation at different, like I'm on the West Business Center board, and so is Supervisor Mulheron. And I'm also on the EDFC board, and so is Supervisor Mulheron. And so I think that's what the issue is how do we deal with that? Because if I'm talking with you about economic development in this format, then what happens when we're talking outside in these other venues? So I guess it's hard for me to say because I've been on those boards for the whole time I've been on the board now. And, but I think that it would probably be cleanest if we didn't have the Board of Supervisor liaisons or representation on those boards. And I guess that would be a question for, I say EDFC and West here, and if that's a problem for your bylaws or anything. And so if you have any input, appreciate that. But that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I would make a motion that we no longer have supervisors serving on those two nonprofits specifically.
Okay, County Council, do you think that would suffice?
Yes, I mean, just to clarify, the motion would be a recommendation to the board, and then
Yes.
obviously
Yeah.
we put that on the board agenda. But yes, that plan would work and would address the Brown Act concerns.
It would get rid of your heartburn on this.
Yeah, there's still plenty of other things that give me heartburn, but
Okay, well, I would second that motion, but we'll wait. We'll wait for public comment at this
Yes,
point,
okay.
okay? So we'll go to public comment.
Scott Adar is on the call, if you could let him in.
Oh, who's that? Oh, Scott Adair? Okay, can we bring Scott on? Okay. Good afternoon, Scott.
Good afternoon, Supervisor. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Wonderful. My name is Scott Adair. I'm the Director of Economic Development for the County of Humboldt, and I'm grateful for this opportunity. Thank you for your service to your community. I understand how very hard supervisors work, seeing the work of my own board in Humboldt County. I wanted to call in and just make you aware that over the past few years, we've had a very positive collaborative relationship with County of Mendocino, working together toward sharing best practices and seeking resource optimization around economic development activities which benefit both counties and which benefit our region. And I really have to say that Mary Ann and her team and the good work that she has done there has helped to put us in that position where we have developed such a strong collaborative relationship with Mendocino County. In our community, our agency, the Office of Economic Development, we are nested under our county administrative office. We're a CAO model, not a CEO model. When I started in this role 5 years ago, we had a team of 3. Because of all of the opportunity that is really on the precipice for California and for our region collectively, including our 2 counties, our team has grown over the last several years from 3 to 10. And our programs managed and the initiatives that we operate for economic development to promote livelihoods and prosperity in the community have also tripled, in addition to the number of grant programs that we manage. Part of our success has been to maintain an operational status quo where less than 5% of our funding actually comes from the Humboldt County General Fund. Most of what we do is grant funded. And it does take dynamic individuals, sometimes hungry individuals, who can go out and look for the grants, and in particular those where programmatic time can be billed against those grants in order to build your economic development team over time. I do want you to be aware that we look at Mendocino County as a strong partner, not just a neighbor in bringing prosperity to and for the region. especially as the state continues a practice of regionalizing efforts related to economic development and putting communities like ours in situations where we must work together, whether it's by our choice or not, in order to maximize certain benefits that are either coming from the state or the federal level. So with that, thank you again very much for your time. I just wanted to reinforce how pleased I am to work with Mary Ann and looking forward to working with Mendocino in the future. Thank you very much.
Scott, I have a couple questions for you. So you work under the CAO, is that correct? Is that how your organization is structured?
That's correct, Supervisor.
Okay, so and the Board of Supervisors then in turn would probably be responsible for some level of direction. How do they interact with you?
That's correct. So I report to the CAO. The Board of Supervisors, they direct the CAO, who in turn directs me. However, we are intrinsically involved in the board's strategic planning process, wherein they set economic development priorities for the community. We're able to give some input there. The Board of Supervisors also, if they have an economic development ask or need, they can work through the CAO to work with our office directly. Our CAO has been pretty good in allowing board members, when issues come up by district, to have direct access to our office. But we just try to keep a communicative structure where we're keeping the CAO apprised of anything that we may be working on for a supervisor directly.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
Yeah, good luck to you guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Take care.
Okay. Robert.
Hi. Robert Gernert, Economic Development and Financing Corporation, Executive Director. I just would urge clarification on how the conflict could arise with Brown Act and just the appointments for the county supervisors, because in our bylaws and formation, it's assigned to board seats for supervisors directly, and I don't know how that impacts the organization as a whole, whether it's just a restructuring of our own bylaws if the board the county seats are no longer represented, but obviously it would present a conflict with quorum and or other issues to conduct normal business as our bylaws stand now with EDFC. So I would just, we're kind of caught in this place of cloudiness, I would characterize it as, in how we chart a path forward and work collaboratively with the county, because it's always been through the bylaws and the designated seats that give us a direct line of kind of interaction and communication with the Board of Supervisors. So I think just clarity around that would help our organization chart a path forward, as well as find the appropriate path of collaboration with the county going forward. So maybe, yeah, just encourage clarity on that part and communication, so that we know we're plotting a course forward that's appropriate and able to communicate collaboratively into the future. It's just not very clear to me currently how that works productively, or we're not violating Brown Act constantly in those meetings if the standing committee's here and where you guys are there at our board meetings. I don't know how those two marry each other in a productive way without violating Brown Act and us changing our bylaws as well.
Right, so I guess what would be needed is, where I'm hearing from county council is that, and we just talked about, pulling out the two liaisons, and it certainly is painful because it's, I really enjoy the good work that's going on there. But at the same time, if you could do the research in figuring out your bylaws so that we don't leave you high and dry without being able to get a quorum together, see what needs to be done on your side to make this transition happen.
It seems as simple as a bylaw change, but the formation of EDFC was based around the county and the four cities collaboratively coming together. So those assigned seats, I think it's probably, and I'm certainly not county council and don't know, but But it seems, in my review of the bylaws, it's as simple as if it's no longer assigned seating, then as long as we have a memo to adjust our bylaws appropriately, and it's not, none of us are doing it arbitrarily or without the other one's involvement, then we can find a reasonable solution and reform our bylaws. But I wouldn't want to do it preemptively or, have it done and then we're in a quorum issue. So it's kind of got to be in tandem at the same time, it seems to me, to keep everybody appropriately operating. It doesn't seem too complicated. It just seems to be a timing issue and make sure we're lining everything up appropriately. So communication between the two to make sure we're doing it in the right time frame.
County Council?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would note there's one additional potential complication, which I know in at least one other instance, when the county was involved in the formation of a private nonprofit, it wrote some requirements for the nonprofit into an ordinance related to a funding mechanism. So we're going to have to do a little bit of research and a little bit of digging on our side, and I'd be happy to work with whoever from EDFC would be appropriate, just to make sure that things line up the way they should.
Okay. Okay, very good.
Hello, my name is Lori Enriquez, and I own Happy Rides, Inc. And I'm here today to tell you economic development is why Happy Rides is so successful in Mendocino County, in fact, all over Northern California. I'm here to tell you that my business is very, very successful. It's a unique business. I provide non-emergency medical transportation to members of our community, and that means wheelchair transports to medical centers that Mendocino County may not have available. We go to Sacramento, we go to Santa Rosa, we go to San Francisco, we transport from Eureka. We're all over Northern California providing services that don't exist in Northern California. We also provide gurney transport, and that is when a patient is on a stretcher bed. We don't have those here privately, so Happy Rides has been doing this. And because of the economic development of West business development, I have been able to do this. I have currently 4 employees. We have 8 vehicles on the road. We're growing. And when I just heard what they said from Humboldt County, that they have an economic development branch and they have 10 employees, that's huge. I kind of would like to see something like that here because there's not enough jobs. You see people wanting to work. You see that it's hard for them. It's not easy. I hear about housing. I hear about transportation. I hear all kinds of things being an employer and listening. And I think really you need to find somebody who can take the helm of this and make sense of it, because there was somebody from the fisheries here. There is me from transportation. I also work in medical fields. I go to all the hospitals. I go to all the nursing facilities. And everybody needs to come to the table to work to make this just as productive as Humboldt. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. I heard your presentation and a year or so ago about what you're doing with your business, and it's really incredible. So.
It's because of West. Honestly, it takes me, but they have really supported me.
Yeah.
And so is EFPC.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Startup Mendocino.
Good afternoon, supervisors, county staff, community. I'm Michael Katz, the Executive Director for the Mendocino Cannabis Alliance. I sent over a document to the supervisors in advance of this meeting, which was an economic impact study from the Emerald Cup, which is going on its 20th year as one of the world's most recognized cannabis cultivation and product competitions. And what this was from 2018, so a lot of things have changed since then, but what we see is that the event was responsible for generating roughly 17.3 million in total economic output in Sonoma County. And this was an event that started 20 years ago here in Mendocino, existed, wanted to continue. Obviously, there were some structural issues, but as we are embarking on this economic development journey, and as we talked about earlier, really focusing on the things and the positive attributes that we have here locally, being able to streamline and encourage and create an environment that supports and allows for these types of cannabis events will really help to drive dollars into the county. Having the fairgrounds be open for business and be willing to participate in these things, trying to identify how, as a county, we can streamline processing for permits. Just as an example, we were interested in trying to put on a cannabis sales event in the village of Mendocino for the 4th of July weekend, and when we started approaching planning and building in March, they suggested that we work on next year. Because there wasn't enough time between March and July to get something done, and that we would have to get on the, obviously we have the Mendocino Historical Review Board and the coastal thing, so there's some different things there, but globally, what we want to see is opportunities be made available and businesses be supported and encouraged to participate and put on these types of events that'll draw people to our community to enjoy our world-class cannabis. So that's just one example, and we look forward to working with the county on how to continue to create economic development opportunities in and around cannabis. Thanks.
Michael, before you go, so I've said all along that if your industry is going to survive in Mendocino County, they have to be close to their customers. There can't be, in between layers, a three-tiered system like we have for alcohol, for large amounts, but within the wine industry, you can sell directly to consumers if you're a small producer. Do you see anything like that on the horizon in California?
I'm glad to say that today, AB 1111, which is a bill that would allow direct sales for small producers, like anybody who's a producer here in Mendocino, acre and under, be able to sell direct to consumers for 32 days out of the year, so at 32 special events or individual days at aggregated events, direct to consumer. And so there will be, assuming this continues forward, passed out of the Assembly, today it passed out of the Senate, assuming it continues forward, then the DCC will be creating a license that will hopefully be cost effective and accessible, that will allow people to make those direct sales. And what that does is it doesn't just enable them to retain the full value of each sale, but it enables them to capture more sales, because what happens at these events where they have to send a consumer X amount of distance to find the retailer, so many sales get lost in whatever that distance is. So in the moment when the person is intrigued, that's the best time to get the sale, as I'm sure many folks know. So we're really much closer to that today, moving forward, than we have been before. So hopefully, and the county, obviously, you all supported that and sent in a letter of support. So hopefully it continues to the governor's desks and gets that signature.
And a historical question. So the Emerald Cup started here in Mendocino County, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Like an Area 51 or something?
Area 101, correct. Yeah, there's definitely an interest in the extraterrestrial as well. But yeah, no, that was Tim Blake, who's the founder of the Emerald Cup. That was originally, it was a very private event. It was all, just one category, just a bunch of people bringing in their products. And it's expanded now to over 50 categories. There are products that are, hemp products that are included that are being sent in from all over the world. And just the focus on our community, the Northern California community, and the incredible products that it produces, we've lost that, and so we have the opportunity to bring it back. And so we're seeing great strides with like Jim Roberts and the Bohemian Chemist really serving as an epicenter for cannabis tourism and experiences here in Mendocino. And we have great retailers like Plant Shop and Dragonfly and Sold to Mendocino on the coast, but really identifying an environment that's encouraging to these bigger things, and working with the fairgrounds, that'll really help us say, hey, Mendocino is open for business, we want to help bring people here. And just seeing the impact, briefly, there were over 200 jobs supported as a result of the Emerald Cup in Santa Rosa, with over 7 million in labor income generated across those jobs. And again, this is in 2018, but we can get back there. The interest is there. The world knows what we have. And if we make it more accessible and let them know that it's here, they will come and get it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. And that's good news about AB 1111.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. My name is Paul Garza, and I'm rising today as the recently elected Vice Chair of the Sonoma-Mendocino Economic Development District. And apparently my first task in that regard is to read into record a statement from Robin Bartholow, who's our newly elected Chair of Sonoma-Mendocino Economic Development District, who unfortunately had to get back for a meeting. And so she's headed back to Sonoma County. So let me just read this to you. And again, these are the words written by Robin Bartholomew. Thank you for allowing me a few moments of your time to support Mary Ann Petrillo, CEO of the West Business Development Center, until about a week ago, Chair of the Sonoma-Mendocino Economic Development District. I've known Mary Ann a relatively short time. I met her a little over 2 years ago when she joined the SMED as a board member. Before I got into the accomplishments of Mary Ann, a little background is in order. When Mary Ann joined, SMED was in a mess, challenged by a lack of focused staff support and with a board that was unclear how to reach their goals, and based on their objectives, we're absolutely rudderless. SMED was formed in 2016 and was the brainchild, at least in part, of Ben Stone, the former director of the Sonoma County Economic Development Board. He carefully tended the group, had a clear idea of what the SMED could do, appointed very focused staff support to launch and roll out this new ED district, and navigated it through its first SEDS document. Then he retired. The following director did not have the same vision for SMED and actually never attended a SMED meeting for a few years. We met annually, which was all we knew it, and there wasn't, of course, much accomplished then. Now let's get to the accomplishments of Mary Ann Petrillo. Fast forward a bit, and as Mendocino County's chair to turn to chair the SMED. Mary Ann volunteered to assume the chair role. It was not hyperbole to say her taking the helm created a renaissance at SMED. Her leadership skills are exemplary, and it became quickly clear to her that the structure of SMED was no longer viable. If this board was ever going to be relevant and effectively put to use, the funding it had secured, the organization needed to be rethought. It was through Mary Ann's deep knowledge and passion for economic development that she offered to the rest of the board other possibilities for SMED, brought the board along and spent many hours, along with many other board members, setting the stage for the structural change of the organization. The SMED became its own entity, managing itself instead of managed by another county entity that had numerous other tasks to focus on. Since that change, has had a number of wins, the AdTech Innovation Hub rating session, which both of you attended, several letters of support and grant applications by projects that align with SEDS in both counties. But the biggest win is that the board is again feeling proud and excited to be part of SMED, and there's a renewed sense of purpose. It is not an exaggeration to say that we wouldn't have been able to make these changes without her and set up the SMED in an instrument for positive change in our region. Mary Ann will be a hard act to follow, but as one would expect from her, she has offered her time and wisdom to help me as I transition into chair. And with that, I guess my duty to SMED is completed. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Just a couple of quick things on SMED. So they're being staffed right now by Josh Metz and RGS, who also we've worked very effectively with through our drought ad hoc. And the entire board came up for a visit to Mendocino County to familiarize themselves with our region, since they're going to be working with it, and I really appreciate the attention that they interaction, and I know that Marianne was instrumental in making that happen. So Marianne's very committed to certainly both SURF and SMED.
Hi, Anna Newman again from the Noyo Harbor District Harbor Master. First off, I would like to thank y'all for this standing committee. I think it's hugely important. I didn't understand how important economic development was until I became a harbor master. I really didn't see the force of our fleet until I really then started working with Marianne. She's been absolutely critical in the development of our new $2.3 million grant that we just received from the SURF program and the EDD. She developed the marine-based entrepreneurial training program, and she's going to take over my community fish markets and help inspire those to be much better than they can be. I am honestly not super great at marketing and community fish markets. So I'm very excited to have her on. I can honestly say that the application and the program would not have happened without Marianne. I believe the week that we submitted, I was so sick with COVID, I could barely sit at my desk. So she made it so all I had to do was send in the email. And through her team and her team's hard work, we were successful in this application. This program will hopefully stabilize over 240 jobs in Mendocino County that are fishing-based jobs. And these are highly skilled jobs, although they don't appear to be from the outside. Oftentimes, our fleet doesn't have a high school diploma, certainly not a bachelor's, certainly not upper education, but they're very specialized jobs and they require very specific knowledge that's passed down from generations. In addition to those jobs, we have 60 to 100 land-based jobs, which will also be supported by this program for the processors, shippers, and marketers in the fishing fleet. Besides those jobs, there are various agencies that are reliant on the commercial fishing industry. So we have the Department of Fish and Wildlife, which does have a field office in Fort Bragg and in Noyo Harbor itself, and they employ marine scientists, surveyors, catch monitors, dockside samplers, as well as a division of wardens that are also marine-based and specific to our marine region. And those jobs all do require upper education. These programs are going to be absolutely critical, and supporting the fishing industry was going to be critical towards Mendocino and Noyo Harbor's development in the future. In addition to the $3.2 million that we've received from the SURF program, we have another near $900,000 going to the Blue Economy Visioning, Resiliency, and Implementation Plan, and I have absolutely no doubt that Marianne is going to be playing a critical role into that program as well. We meet monthly as the Noyo Ocean Collective, which is a collective of folks that are specifically working towards the blue economy in the Fort Bragg area, and we're really looking to see how we can transform our industry to the changing climates, the changing industry itself, changing regulations, and what that's going to look like in Fort Bragg. We have this deep heritage of fishing within our bones, and we don't want to lose that, but we also understand it's becoming harder and harder to be successful in those industries. Thank you guys so much for everything you're doing for us. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. If you ever need anything, technical input from the fishing industry, Marianne has somehow downloaded a lot of the knowledge in my brain into her brain. You can ask her, or feel free to ask me as well. Thank you.
Just a real quick question for you, Anna. So let's think for a second about the overlap with the visitor experience to Fort Bragg, which I think is integral because everybody wants to eat seafood, including me. So I mean, it's if we don't go down to the harbor, we will go to one of the local fish markets or grocery stores that sell fresh fish and purchase them. So are you thinking about this as part of what Fort Bragg is about?
Most definitely. We see huge tourism in the north side of the harbor, which is something that I didn't even touch on in my first 3 minutes. I think we have 6 successful restaurants down there, and one of the things that always catches me is when people see that direct interaction to the commercial fishing industry, they love it. There's absolutely nothing better than sitting at Noyo Fish Company where you're eating rockfish tacos and there's a boat unloading catch right there. People want that experience. They love the romanticism of the fishing industry, even though I think it's smelly and hard and dirty. People, they're far enough away. They don't smell what we smell like under our slickers. But there's that deep romanticism in fishing, and we certainly do draw an extreme amount of crowds into the harbor. And I think as we look at our blue economy visioning and resiliency and implementation plan, I know that the county is going to be looking at sea level rise and how zoning in the harbor itself is taken into account. Right now we're zoned as fishing village, so any business down there must directly tie into the commercial fishing industry. I support that wholeheartedly, but I also understand that we need to rely on tourism. We can have a t-shirt shop that operates just as well in downtown Fort Bragg, but if we lose one of our fish processors or one of those docks, a commercial fisherman can't offload his catch in downtown Fort Bragg. So we need to understand that our tourists love our harbor. They want to see a successful working harbor, and then how to get those other tourism-based businesses into Fort Bragg so we all flow together.
Thank you.
Michelle Hutchins, I'm now speaking as the chair of the West Business Development Center Board. I do want to thank both of you, as you have both served closely with our board and assisted us in a lot of the decisions that came along through the work that we did for Mendocino County through the economic development monies that was given to West Business Development Center over a year ago. I just want to encourage you, as you sit here as the Standing Committee for Economic Development, let's not reinvent the wheel. Please, let's follow paths that are working and that are already established and flourishing. You've heard several business people speak to the successes that they've had in working with West Business Development Center. You gave the West Business Development Center $150,000 over a year ago, and for that you've seen over $7 million of grants come into this county. The work has been well done, and really for a small investment. So I urge you to not reinvent the wheel. And I know you're both people of wisdom and of practicality, and I understand that our county has few dollars to make a lot of things happen. And so please, let's use those dollars wisely in a manner in which we've already seen be successful. So thank you, Michelle Hutchins.
Thank you.
Mary Ann Petrillo, CEO of West Business Development Center. Like others said before, thank you both, really, Supervisor McGorty and Supervisor Haschek, for bringing the economy to the forefront of our county's thinking. I know a lot of people have talked about economic development. A lot of people don't understand it. I'm still a continual learner of economic development. But one thing I do know for sure over the last year, and the people that I worked with, is bringing together a coalition of the willing works. You need people. We have amazing people in this county and amazing organizations in this county who are doing many good things. The problem is a lot of us don't know what each other is doing, and there's a lot of redundancy, and there's a lot of missed opportunity because of that. This past week, I had the chance to be at the California Association of Local Economic Developers. This is a statewide association that I've been a part of for the past 5 years. It was really amazing to me because this is the first year that people came up to me and introduced me to other people as Mendocino County representative. They talked about Mendocino County like I've never heard before. I was the only person who used to go to these kind of meetings, and here we had federal and state agencies acknowledging the blue economy and acknowledging the hydrogen highway and talking about the potential that Mendocino County has to offer. This is huge. This is just the beginning for our county. Yes, there's a lot of work. All of you here in this room knows that we have kind of an insurmountable problems and challenges, but we also have opportunities, and we also have the opportunity to be successful in a sustainable, well thought out environment. You've got 4 documents that tell you how to do economic development in this county. You have the Move 2030 program that had over 200 people involved in developing it. You have the community economic action plan, which was just the community telling you. It wasn't even agencies, it was individuals telling you. You have the SEDS, which costs thousands of dollars to produce. That's the Sonoma-Mendocino Economic Development District document. And you have the strategic plan for Mendocino County. You have 4 documents that tell you how to implement it. I really encourage you to take these steps, build this bridge to implementing these actions, these activities, these programs that are talked about. Yes, we do need funding. Yes, $150,000 is not enough, but if you have your core group of people, and again, my advice is to organize around a Mendocino Economic Council that brings together your city jurisdictions, that brings together your economic development agencies, that brings together organizations that will really propel Mendocino County forward and leverage all the grant opportunities that are coming down the pike. Because we don't know how long those grants are going to be with us. We need to have a core group of people who are going after that funding, and we will reach our goals, but we have to start it someplace. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Online?
Hello?
We can hear you.
All right. This is Peter McNamee again with the Grassroots Institute. When the full board considered establishing the standing committee, we testified in support of that. And the reason that we testified in support of it is because we think that economic development should rise from the grassroots up in a very open public forum, that it shouldn't be the sole purview of specialists and industry experts, but it should reflect what economies are supposed to do. And in our definition of what an economy is supposed to do, it's supposed to produce the goods and services that a community needs for its well-being by applying labor and capital to commerce. That is how you produce the wealth that pays for the schools. That's how you produce the homes. That's how you produce the goods and services that people need. That's how you provide them with medical care. And because that is so key to our community and its well-being, we think that it should have high visibility. So in considering how this committee might serve the people of Mendocino, I would like to stress 3 things that I would like to see it do. First is, I think that it can create a public forum for the discussion of economic development opportunities, not just from, say, state and federal funds that become available, but from the private sector as well. As we look at our problems, we know that commerce is this interaction between government regulators and the business community. And so we need to have a discussion of how we work collectively together to produce the best outcomes. The second thing I think this steering committee can be particularly useful in doing is clarifying the roles and responsibilities of the government, and particularly the county government, in terms of how it impacts commerce in this county and what ends it produces through its regulatory process. It should be easy and streamlined as possible for people to do good business. It should also be difficult and hard for people to do bad business. We want good corporate citizens, and as a community, we think this body can help us get there. The final thing, and I think it's really, really important is that you can't look in the rearview mirror to know where you need to go into the future. And so the county needs a vehicle to have a discussion about not just who we are today, but what we want to be as we go forward as a community, what we want our economy to look like, how it should be structured. We need that because we're not just talking about the 90,000 people that are in Mendocino County today, but we may be talking about 250,000 people over in the next 20 or 30 years who are driven into places like Mendocino by climate change on a global basis, which will move about 3 billion people from where they currently are to places like Mendocino, which will remain habitable in this next century. So I urge you, this is the time to have that discussion, to look in the bigger picture of where we want to go. And so I applaud the creation of the standing committee, and I hope that you will look to the Grassroots Institute and to all the other community-based organizations as a resource to draw upon as you do your work.
Thank you, Peter. Any other comments?
There are no other comments.
Okay, back to the standing committee.
So we do have one motion that we should probably go ahead and take care of, which was to remove our representatives from EDFC and West Company from the board.
Right. Working and just in collaboration so that there's coordination and everything, so no one's left high and dry without quorums or
Yes.
whatever the situation might be. Okay. Okay, call the question.
Supervisor McCourty?
Yes.
Supervisor Hashak?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
So I guess the big picture is how are we going to do the work that needs to be done for economic development between these standing committees? Okay. And, we have this 150,000 that the board committed to representation, I think. And so, I got an email from Marianne Petrillo saying, there's $150,000, $35,000 is related to engagement with SMED, because that needs to be our contribution there, one way or another. And then $115,000 would be left. And, I know we're trying to transition to in-house, but at the same time, we need to keep the continuity, right? And so there needs to be this transition period. And I certainly think that we've gotten our money's worth out of West. And so what Marianne was proposing was that the West, or whoever it is that gets this contract in the transition phase, be the county representative for SURF, facilitate and document Mendocino Economic Development monthly meetings, or however many meetings there are between our standing committee meetings, report out at quarterly Economic Development Standing Committee, identify economic development infrastructure grants and partners, which I think that is really important in trying to do this transition to in-house, because like Scott Adair said, in Humboldt County, they're paying 95% with grants. And then attendance at the California Economic Development Conference, California Economic Summit, Cal Ed Conference, and Statewide Rural Exchange Summit. So, and also, SURF, SMED, and then these others, which I think they're probably all important, but we do need someone who can convene these people in the meantime.
Yeah, I have a lot of confidence in Marianne and Josh and would like to continue working with them. And I guess the question goes to the CEO office and county council is, how do we do this? So are we obligated to create an RFP? Can we have a call for proposals that's limited to one group, like a contract extension, or what do you recommend so that everything seems above board and is compliant with generally accepted practices of bidding and so forth?
Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm responding to the chair. I think we'd actually have to look at when the last RFP was and what the current status is, and I'm afraid I don't have that off the top of my head here. That's something that we could look at and either get back to the committee, or if you want to refer it to the board with a recommendation for what you're going to do, we could have the research by the time it gets to the board.
Okay, so here's another question. So while John and I can't talk to each other because of the Brown Act considerations, we can certainly talk to you and to CEO Antle, correct? So we do have a way of communicating on this.
Yeah, that's correct. We just we essentially can't pass information back and forth between the two of you, but we can provide you updates with where we are on things or answer questions that you may have.
So, but I see that we have someone in the audience that might have a recommendation.
Well, I'll just say before Michelle speaks, is that whatever happens, I think that what Peter McNamee said, really resonates, that we need to have a broad-based representation at these meetings. That's certainly what we've tried to do with the standing committee, is make it more public, higher profile, and bring these issues and make sure that everyone feels like they're involved in these discussions, because it is a discussion of the whole community.
Yeah, and we're very successful with that, with our drought ad hoc of whenever we convene meetings, we would have very good representation from all the small water companies around the county, small and large. And I think that's what made that effort really successful, is the people who cared were at the table. So.
Yeah, and that's what I'd like to see, industry people, but also people representing other facets, the environmental, the labor, all those communities that have been, anyone who has interest in this, which I think everyone here does, and certainly education has to be at the table too.
Question. I do believe that as the chief executive officer, they can pass information between the two board members. As long as the public and the board receive that information at the same time, it's been my understanding that that role could be done. So I would just be curious how that is in Brown Act where that can't be done.
Just through the chair, no, that's not how it works. If there's a meeting of the quorum, it does need to be noticed in public. There was actually, I believe, an AG's opinion some years back when email was first being more widespread, that asked essentially, would it be consistent with the Brown Act to have offline communication between a majority of the members of a legislative body simply by posting it all online, making it all open to the public? And the answer was no. That essentially it's not only about making sure that everyone is able to see the communication. Brown Act also contains requirements that people have advanced notice of the items that are going to be discussed, know when and where they can show up, and then have the opportunity to comment on those items prior to the action by the committee. So they need to be able to have notice, to see the discussions, and then also to have the input.
So that information sharing happens when items are published, and that can be shared with everyone, the public, at the same time as board members.
Yes, what I'm referring to specifically, Mr. Chair, is the communication between the board members.
Yeah.
So if the committee is going to talk and to meet, essentially, that needs to be at a noticed meeting. There isn't a way to allow offline communication between a majority of the membership merely by posting it or making it public.
Okay.
However, if one of the board members were to have a question of county council or the chief executive officer, that question could be answered prior to an open meeting by sending the answer to both the commit, of the representatives on the committee. It's my understanding of how Brown Act works, and it's how we work with our district superintendents and school boards all the time, which I believe operates under the same Brown Act, that information that is a question, it may not be a decision, but a question for clarification, I think can be distributed, but that's my understanding, and I'm just
So,
operating
again,
from education.
Mr. Chair, the board members can ask us questions. We can provide information to the board members, but relaying a question, essentially who asked what questions or this sort of thing, starts to venture in the possibility of essentially deliberations. So while we try to make sure that we keep the members of our body informed, we don't relay essentially that one member asked a question to the rest of the body.
Okay, and I believe I've seen that in communications from you before when you send clarifications to the whole board, but you don't identify who asked the question, correct?
Yes, and I will say that may not refer to questions from the board either. We're just, that may be staff. So we're just providing information. We're not getting into anything that's going to be deliberation or suggesting what's of interest or the thought process of another member of the board.
Okay.
All right. And then there's also this issue that the current contract has about $10,000 on it remaining. And should it be used to implement the Invest in Mendocino campaign with a launch at the Regional Economic Summit, which is in September 21st and 22nd, I think, which is the same time as RCRC.
So I'm guessing that if there's anything left in the contract, that's something that should go back to the full board for decision. So.
Yes, although certainly this committee can make a recommendation to the board as to what action you would like to see happen.
Mr. Chair, do you have any particular feelings on it? What would you like to do?
Well, I think that the Regional Economic Summit is going to be a big deal. It's happening in Ukiah, and I think people from the economic development from the state and federal levels are going to be here, and I think pitching, what the Invest in Mendocino does is really pitch the wonders of investing in Mendocino by this video. We've seen it, but if you wanted to do a quick blurb on it.
Sure, I'll give a little bit of background. We've already created the video for it, but it is meant to be a full-blown campaign with website and ways to engage with city jurisdictions. We've passed it along to the cities, we've been showing chambers, we've been showing other entities the idea of this campaign, and everybody's behind it. Again, this is not I want to be very clear, it's not a visitor promotion. It's about getting people to see the value of looking at Mendocino and its assets and its workforce and its people and investing in it. It's a very first stage, because the first thing you have to do is to get people believing you. And then from that comes a lot of other things. And that's where I tie together this whole approach of communicating to people who want to come to Mendocino and help build homes, help start new businesses, do the hydrogen highway, blue economy. All those things are individuals who need to look at us with fresh eyes about who and how do we work together. And so that's what this is the catalyst for. And it's a perfect time to launch it at the Regional Summit, because the Regional Summit this year is going to be in our hometown.
So do you feel that the existing contract doesn't include that?
No, the existing contract does. That was originally going to be the work campaign, working at the county. But we've morphed it, because of the situation and what was available to us, into this investing in Mendocino, because we've gotten a lot of good comments, and so this is building that momentum.
So it sounds
So-
like that work can be done with
Yeah,
the
it's all,
existing contract.
yes, it's all within
Okay.
the existing contract, definitely.
Okay.
The one thing I would like to say, just as you're debating this in terms of how you're structuring it, and I realize I'm the last person to know all the ins and outs of the Brown Act. What I do know is that when you are going after grants, you don't have time. So just always remember that grants come out, and maybe you have 6 weeks to produce it. Maybe you have 3 weeks to produce it. If you're lucky, you get 2 months. So that means to actually write all the paraphernalia, all the materials. And a grant could take anywhere from just 14 to about 35 hours of just writing the grant. That's after you've already laid the foundation and got all your partners together and got all your sponsorship letters and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I just say this, and I say it many times to all of you, is you don't want to be the one that's missing out on the opportunity to take advantage of these grants. What we know is that the county has challenges and it has needs. What we have to do is match those needs to those grants and have the supporting groups, and many of them talked here today, they're all, everybody's here, have them all be in alignment, because that's how you get a grant. They want to know what your ecosystem is. That's what I presented on at the conference, is the ecosystem, the entrepreneurial ecosystem, the people working together. That's how you win these awards. So I encourage, city council and supervisors, Brown Act is important, and the transparency, absolutely, and I like the idea of the standing committee, but you've got to have people working and getting these things done so that when the time comes, you could just
Right.
execute. That's
Okay,
all.
thank you. So I guess we have Shwen Malela here, who's part of the grant team, or the head of the grant team. And so that's, I don't know, I guess, Shwen, the question for you would be, are you able to identify economic development grants that are out there? Is your team capable of responding in a timely way, or do you need help in even identifying what those grants are and where they come from and all that?
Hi, Swan Malala, Executive Office. I oversee day-to-day supervision of OES, disaster recovery, grants division, and contracts division, such as when OES transitioned to the Executive Office, it was created a more, a more efficient way to connect with disaster recovery. Our projects go hand in hand. What I mean to say is we are already working on this. The grants division has already, researched economic development grants. So we do. We used to be disaster recovery. We transitioned to resiliency, and I think it's the same idea. So recovery is not a straight line. It is a process. So the more resilient the community is, the more resilient it is. Sorry, I take it back. The stronger the community is, the more resilient it is when an impact happens. So it's the same for economic recovery. The stronger you build the economy, the stronger it is when there is an economic impact. And I do believe I do need staffing, but with the correct staffing, I do believe we have the capacity to work with our partners, use the same strategies and procedures that we currently have in place. So for example, Supervisor Hashtag, you sat in, when we built that brick grant for Brook Trails, we met with Sherwood Tribe, we met with Brook Trails Community Service Districts, we met with the fire departments up there, we met with Willits, City, we met with the Sherwood tribe. I think I mentioned it already, but it's the same idea. Once you apply for grants, we already have that structure going on to research grants. You engage as Marianne described, you engage the correct stakeholders, get the input, and you implement the project. But I do believe we have capacity to build an economic development with strong outcomes, but I do need capacity in staffing. Our grants division only has 1 FTE.
All right,
So
very
does that
good.
answer the question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a lot of confidence in Ms. Malalo, having worked with her on one of our CAL FIRE grants to come up with escape routes in the East Hills during fire or flood emergencies. So we're working together on that. That's just starting. I guess a question for CEO Antle is, again, thinking about being nimble, given the short cycle for these grants. You must be used to that by now, because I mean, you work with other departments that also are put under the same kind of constraints. Do you feel like we're able to do that?
Yes, we work with the board very closely. We listen to the directions of the board, and we follow those initiatives that you put forward.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
That's kind of been the gig since 2017, is really jump on them as fast as you can, get them going, and then get before the board, get them approved, and keep going through the process. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm feeling pretty good about the capacity of Mendocino County to eventually have an economic development person. If they're backed up with input from the community, it could be pretty strong. And based on that, I would like to make a motion to report back to the board some of our findings from today. The first one being that we'd like to work with staff to create an economic development position to build capacity for us to be able to apply for economic development grants. We recommend that we have a consultant kind of in place while we're building this capacity to make sure that we don't lose a spot in both our SURF and our SMED process, because that's critical. We've established good relations, and we would like to continue working with West and RGS on this if it's possible. And we'd like to direct staff to help us look through the RFP process as to how we might be able to do this.
And what about the meetings in between our standing committee meetings? Is there going to be work done in that?
Good question, and that's as far as I got as I was scribbling notes during our discussion. Yes, there needs to be something, and I think that's something that perhaps we can work with staff and our consultant to figure out how that's going to work. What are the interaction between the community and our standing committee to be sure that we're communicating.
Darcy Antle, CEO, we could work to come up with a plan on how to have stakeholder input in between and then report back to the board.
Okay, does that sound good?
All right, so that will come back to the board? Because I
Yes.
don't want to wait 3 months for our next meeting.
Correct.
I would suggest if that's the recommendation of the board, you make it as a motion, and then we'll go ahead and get that on for
Okay.
a board meeting.
Okay, and that's what I'm recommending as a motion, if I can repeat it. So it's to work to staff capacity for an economic development position in the county, to work with our contracts and grants people. We'd like to continue with an interim contract to do our economic development work, particularly with SMED and with SURF, because we already have a presence at the table. If at all possible, we'd like to continue with West and RGS as doing that work, and then finally work with the CEO's office to come up with a way to involve stakeholders with our standing committee.
And I like that. But one other part of it needs to be how we're going to fund the transition to in-house. So would that be with this consultant looking for grants that would provide economic development capacity in the county, or would the county do that? And that's for the CEO.
Well, that's why I just said work with staff and kind of leave all possibilities on the table.
Oh.
I don't know. CEO Antle, you comfortable with that, or would you think it needs to be more specific?
Yeah, CEO Antle, I think that's something we could definitely create as part of the plan that we report back to the board is during this transition, we are going to need X for consultants to continue this type of work while we build up our capacity over the next year.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's my motion. Was Deputy Clerk of the Board able to capture that? Okay, so.
I'll second it.
Good thing. All right.
All right. Let's see. Okay, we'll call the question. Okay.
Supervisor Hashak?
Yes.
Supervisor McGorty?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right. Let's see. Now we have agenda item number 3A, which is public expression for anything that's not on the agenda. Yes.
Yeah, Paul Garza. I just wanted to rise and express some concerns about the direction of the SURF, the RISE governance structure that has currently been worked on. As you know, that the combination of Cal Poly, Humboldt, and AEDC, they've done a very good job of rolling this whole SURF process out to this point. But they seem to be stumbling consistently on this issue of governance, and it's a critical one for us. And I'd like to indicate that they seem to fail to understand the importance of economic development organizations and in the way they're preventing the structure. And secondly, while the SURF is going to be carefully watched by the state and state agencies, and there are a number of, as you know, state regulations that they're going to have to comply with and their grant requirements and all of that, there also is a need to have accountability in the community. And that's the thing that I think that they currently consistently failing upon. There are a $5 million grant to our region, which is immense. You know, let me put it in this context. That represents in our communities, the 4 counties, about $2.25 of investment for every individual. If you contrast that with Los Angeles County, and Los Angeles County has 11.5 million people, they only got $5 million as well, which represents an investment of what, less than 50 cents per citizen. So it's a very significant investment that we should do everything we should to assure that we get the benefit from it. And I just like to, I know that both of you have been carefully watching this. I just want to point it out. It seems to me that we've got a disconnect here. They've created a structure that looks very good for creating a lot of good dialogue, but it's only the organizations that are going to be able to turn these things into grants and make them successful projects. And additionally, it's a lot of money, and it needs to be accountable to the communities, not just to the state. And you can only do that if they evolve a steering committee that becomes an independent nonprofit and then takes responsibility for the financial accountability to our local communities. So with that, that's kind of where things are as I see it, and I want to express that concern.
Thank you.
And there's a Redwood Region Rising meeting on Thursday at 11 o'clock. Right? Okay. Mr. Katz.
Good afternoon, supervisors, county staff. I'm Michael Katz, Executive Director of the Mendocino Cannabis Alliance. Anyone here this morning will have heard this announcement, but I wanted to remake it for the benefit of this specific committee. So recently, the California State Fair last year, they started bringing cannabis in as a competition category, and Mendocino cultivators did very well last year, and I'm pleased to report that they also did very well this year. So we had 9 farms based in Mendocino who are all Mendocino Cannabis Alliance members who brought home 18 awards. through different categories in the competition. So there were 3 in the Best of California, and that was Heart Rock Mountain Farm, Essentia, and Green Shock Farms. In the outdoor category, we brought home 6 of the top 10 gold medals, and that's for Happy Day Farms, Heart Rock Mountain Farm, Essentia, Martiwana, Green Shock Farms, and Essentia won another one, so they actually got 2 golds. And then there are silver medals in that category outdoor for Green Shock Farms, 2 for Essentia, and a unique gold for Emerald Spirit Botanicals. One of our final remaining indoor cultivators, Woodwide Farms, won a gold for their indoor flower. And then we had gold medals for Family First Farms and Higher Heights from Mendocino in the mixed light category, and additional silver medals for Higher Heights in the silver mixed light category. So just to show that we have an incredible history of high quality cannabis that's beating out competition from all over the state in expressiveness, and that is really unique to our area. And so as we're talking about economic development and as we're thinking about ways to utilize the resources that we have here, tapping into our world-class cannabis and inviting the world to experience that with us is one of the major ways that we can do that. So we look forward to continuing to engage in these conversations with the county. Thanks.
Thank you.
Right. All right, seeing no other public comment? Okay, any announcements? All right, so it's 4:03 and we'll